It is no secret that the 1960s founded a generation of seekers. The social conditions of the decade, which included historic cries for racial equality, the unbridled optimism of a new generation of detached youth, and the beginnings of the nihilist journey of the Vietnam War, highlighted the ways in which society constructs itself, encouraging individuals to try their own hand in building a more beneficial reality. This era of social reconstruction was hallmarked by the unprecedented growth of new religious movements, and a revived interest in the philosophies of the Eastern Hemisphere, notably Buddhism and Hinduism. A decade of intense change came to a close with the increasing hopelessness of conflict in Vietnam and a rise in conservative philosophy that shaped American politics perhaps even more than the hippies could have ever feared. Trucking through this new dark age would be one of the few still burning candles of the psychedelic revolution, the Grateful Dead. The Grateful Dead's seemingly never-ending tour would represent a protracted effort to keep the free and volatile energy of the 1960s going strong. Until their dissolution in 1995, the Grateful Dead created moments of timelessness in their performances. In the same way that the chants of a chazan bring a synagogue's congregation back to the sacred space of the Temple of Jerusalem, the spiraling sounds of the Dead bring their audience back to a time of infinite possibility. While it was never the intention of any of the band's members to lead others in faith, the chaotic, colorful, and often entheogenic environments of their shows beg for religious experiences to occur. In his work From Ritual to Theater, the sociologist Victor Turner highlights the role of liminal spaces in fostering significant spiritual change in individuals, and how symbols embodied by rituals work to construct those spaces. Turner broke down these coming-of-age rituals into three distinct phases: separation, transition, or the liminal stage, and incorporation. While each aspect of this process is crucial to having this sort of religious experience, it's the liminal phase which is often the most traumatic aspect of the coming-of-age rite, and therefore often the most impactful. Turner's description of liminality is that of purposeful chaos. Only through intense disorganization and separation from society's fundamental structures can individuals come to gain new appreciations or understandings of the world that's been present around them their entire life. It is undeniable that the Grateful Dead, through the use of a well-defined set of symbols, both visual and musical, have an infamously irreplicable style of creating liminal space, which lays the foundation for memorable and life-changing experiences during their dizzy and enduring sets. Most Deadheads will agree that there is much, much more to the Grateful Dead than just the music. Many Deadheads will incorporate aspects of the Dead's music into spiritual practices such as meditation. However, one group chose to center their spirituality around the ritual of the Grateful Dead's concerts. The Spinners, as they would come to be known, are better defined by their ritual practices than any sort of uniform theology or cosmology. It's actually from their characteristic whirling dance style of meditation that they take their name. Just like any religion, the Spinners did not come up with their practices in a cultural void. Their namesake itself is derived from the much older Sufi practice of whirling. Just as the Dead would represent the lasting impact of 1960s rock and roll, the individual Spinners' adoptions of various religious practices would be representative of the worldly nature of 60s spirituality. Because of their disorganized nature, likely encouraged by their constant migration, it's hard to say when or where spinning to the Grateful Dead started, but by the late 1980s, Spinners were common and identifiable members of the audience at shows. attempt to change the fluid nature of spinner spirituality was first made by Joseph Leon III in the late 1980s. Leon began by befriending fellow deadheads in his hometown of Worcester, Massachusetts, and quickly worked to coerce them into unequal relationships. Through much of the 1980s, Leon's Church of Unlimited Devotion, named after the Grateful Dead song The Golden Road to Unlimited Devotion, would follow the band and make a nomadic living. From 1985 to 1986, Leon would be bound to the state of Massachusetts, serving probation after he and two other church officials attempted to move 22 pounds of marijuana over the Texas-Mexico border. In 1988, Leon would accept a $108,000 loan from an early follower named Luther Delaney in order to purchase a ranch in Philo, California that had previously been owned by a group of Hare Krishnas. Even nowadays, as self-identified spinners represent a diverse group of people who may or may not have defined religious views, the meditative practice of spinning is their uniting feature. In practice, however, the establishment of this monastery organized spinner theology and practice in ways that marked a departure from the religion's nomadic roots. Newspapers of the time described how devotees would wake to morning drum circles and chant the names of Krishna, then settle into their evenings called into prayer over the Catholic rosary with their temple lavishly decorated in traditional Christian iconography. While it was not expected of all members, many of those inside the monastery, and most notably the leadership, took vows of celibacy. Beyond these more traditional and borrowed religious practices, many of their most recognizable and defining practices are the ones that have been adapted from their history of being a nomadic group of spiritual deadheads. The live spinning that birthed the church and fostered many of the connections that allowed for the consolidation of the monastery and its leadership had been replaced by the practice of spinning to Grateful Dead tapes. Other iconic features of the live experience of the Grateful Dead were also modified to suit a sedentary lifestyle. The iconic concept of Shakedown Street, for instance, was worked into church fundraising by selling products crafted by the members on the streets of Berkeley, California, which by the 1990s would have developed into one of several hippie meccas. While most of the church's fatal controversies would occur during the time spent on the Palto Monastery, patterns of abuse were recognized by members' families early on. Boris Rukhan, father of church member Victoria Rukhan, stated in an interview with the newspaper of Joseph Leon III's hometown, the Worcester Gazette, that after his daughter joined at age 19, he attended every Grateful Dead show he could in his area. Even during these brief visits, Rukhan concedes, "I say my daughter, but when she talked to me, it was like the group talking, not her. I did not feel like I was looking at my daughter." Joseph Leon III would be accused of violently abusing female members by the San Francisco Chronicle, which would go on to mention Leon breaking his vow of celibacy by having a secret wife and mistress, both of whom he also beat. The breakout of these overlapping scandals would result in church membership ousting Joseph Leon III as their leader and changing their title to the Family of Unlimited Devotion. Leon would go on to deny any claims of physical abuse, while the family would reevaluate their principal beliefs until the monastery and its membership would fall into obscurity. People continue to identify as spinners today in much the same way those outside the church always have. There is some level of debate within the Grateful Dead community as to whether spinning should be viewed as a spiritual practice or simply a fun dance. While spinning certainly holds different significance to different individuals, it is this individual ability to interpret the ritual meaning of spinning that contributes to its significance. Direct and intense spiritual belief are not required for rituals to still have beneficial spiritual significance. Just as a secular Jewish person can attend shul, daven, and fabring as a cultural experience, a deadhead can go to a show, spin, have a great time, and not see it as being a way of communing with a higher power necessarily. This, however, does not invalidate the framework for religious experiences that exists within both of these environments and in both of these rituals. Ultimately, the spinners are a group of seekers who may have ended up as lost at the end of their journey as when they had started it. Following the eventual dissolution of the monastery, the spinners lost all organized practice. The death of Jerry Garcia and the subsequent breakup of the Grateful Dead erased the last glimpse of a never-replicable and irrecoverable sacred place spinners used to be able to call home. With no strong unifying framework to begin with, the loss of the Grateful Dead marked a negative turning point in the adherence of most spinners, with many leaving practice completely, and those remaining confined mostly to home spinning.